Matt, good morning and good afternoon here from in the UK to all of our attendees. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see so many of you coming in with us today. We're live on air here from across the world. I'm sitting here, although my background says I'm in London, that is factually incorrect. I'm in Scotland here in the United Kingdom. Joined today by Matthew Berg, our VP of Product and our IT Solutions Suite. Matt, I've been at Lightspeed 3.5 years. This is the first time that our overlords are letting you and I be in a room together to talk about this stuff. I think it's quite dangerous, but I'm really looking
Yes.
forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I don't know if they have time for this, but I'm certainly excited to do it. To your point, it's been a few years actually of us talking about finally getting together. So glad it's happening.
So Matt and I would frequently, just as in the general, part of my role is to look after our international markets and the growth that we have there. There's lots of interesting filter challenges that we come across that are just a little bit different sometimes. So Matt and I spend a lot of time talking about how we can innovate and change our products a little bit to suit all of the international markets that we serve. So quite often it's a very geeky conversation, which I love. Today, we're going to try and deliver a mixture of that to make sure that we're digging deep into some of the technical aspects of our solutions and how we see some of the challenges that are there for filtering as we see them in 2026. We are going to keep it a bit high level as well. So generally the flow, Matt, if you're good with it, I'm going to kind of talk about those challenges, put up the skittles, and then it's your job to knock them down with some of the technical answers and just how we're kind of seeing the world today. Does that sound okay?
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay. And of course, there is some audience participation as we go through. It's got two forms for you today. If you're joining this webinar, we are going to have the Q&A option, and those questions is open throughout. So if you'd like to ask either Matt or myself a question, we will attempt as we come to the end to be able to answer those. Or we've got various points where we're going to just push a pause on Matt and I speaking, and we've got a few polls and questions. It's always good for this to be at least a little bit of a two-way dialogue between those of you who are joining. Normally, when I host a UK or an international webinar, I recognize lots of the participants. I see a few familiar faces, but it's great that we've got such an audience across the globe today, including so many of our US customers as well, who not my normal person that I'm speaking with. So it's nice to be reaching out a little bit wider than usual. With that being said, we're going to make a start, and I'm going to get our presentation here ready to go, so that we can kind of share this with you, and we can illustrate our conversation a little bit. As I said, my name's Colin McCabe. I look after our international markets. You've already been introduced to Matt Berg, looking after our IT solution suite. We're really talking about some really particular parts of filtering is the goal today. We're going to see how these topics are reshaping filtering. We really do see that there is a shift happening. We're seeing that some more of the nuanced functionality is really starting to make a real difference for our customers and how they're supporting their schools. And of course, what that impact has for students, for teachers, for administrators across our districts, municipalities, and the regions that we serve. And it wouldn't be Lightspeed without us trying to support you with some of the best practices that we're seeing from our customers, that we're seeing from schools across the world. With that being said, we're going to dive straight into the first one, and it's a huge one. It probably should be no surprise that there's going to be a section dedicated for us to talk about cybersecurity. When we think about cybersecurity, we know there are many, many facets. On the Lightspeed side, there is a certain percentage that we really support there, and we're going to start certainly from the content filtering side. There's lots of challenges with filtering in general. You can see some of them here, and it's getting increasingly hard to be able to control this environment where students are using the internet. Maybe that's VPNs, maybe it's proxies, maybe it's just that the type of content that's being consumed by our students is no longer quite as clean cut as the website that needs to be visited. Here I'm thinking about the documents that are being generated inside productivity suites or the prompts and the content being created by generative AI tools. And of course, this is leading to an increased amount of risks. Some of the statistics on this particular slide are really, really scary. And we've gone, I believe, in the last number of years, particularly across 2025, of a belief that this was happening elsewhere in the corporate sphere. to this is something that really is happening inside our education bubble amongst K-12 school districts, amongst municipalities and regions that we have across the world, even at the sort of Department for Education level in certain countries, are seeing the challenges that cyber attacks can bring, and they're bringing them to their educational doors, not just into corporate networks. And largely what we're finding by, all of the time we spend reading about where these are coming from, one of the largest threat vectors, for want of a better phrase, and it comes from the fact that we've got so many students using the internet, and that risk is incredibly large with so many students that have not free access to the internet, but free will to use the internet within the guardrails that we have. This is why our filtering systems need to ensure that they're not just protecting from the harmful content on the internet that we already know about, but that the brand new content that is being created. So I've made a big statement there. I feel that schools are forcing and seeing more and more that there are cybersecurity incidents happening. I'm perfectly expecting to this poll that a few of you will, many of you may say no, but again, I'm also expecting quite a few yeses, and I'm seeing you already engaging, and we have got a much larger number than I was expecting. We're seeing it as people keep answering. We're seeing it just slowly tick towards that at about 60% saying yes. Matt, that's probably a larger percentage than I was expecting. You notice I teed it up there to expect one or two, but we're really living and breathing what we're seeing here with it's landed on a 50-50 split. Would you have thought that, Matt, or was that a little bit unusual for you?
Actually, I would say I'm probably not actually that surprised, and part of it is because I think what can constitute a cybersecurity incident is also just so varied, right? I think a lot of people outside looking in, they think of a cybersecurity incident and they're probably just thinking of ransomware, right? Which, that's obviously really not a good one. But also, you had actually on the previous slide, how compromised sites. It's like we think about people getting their credentials stolen or phished. We think about even just like getting malware on a specific device and what that can mean, because some of those things like to traverse networks. And so really, I think that when it comes down to things that actually create an incident of some form, it can be, um, even though it can feel like isolated or small, it has a significant impact and has repercussions. So yeah, it's unfortunate to see it so high.
100%. And yeah, I appreciate the clarification. You're helping me think about it. I'm thinking about these large scale things that we hear about in the news, but this is happening day in, day out on a
Yep.
smaller scale. It's still causing trouble for administrators. It's still causing challenges for our individual students who are living and through this. So we want to be able to support with levels at all levels, just the big hitters, the ransomware ones, like that Matt says, but throughout all of those potential cybersecurity incidents. I've touched a little bit on what the negative aspects on here, but I wanted to just land on one particular sentence around the idea that it's really hard to sort of challenge and to stop what you can't see. Certainly in advance, it's very hard to be able to identify that. The other negative aspects are, I guess, nearly self-explanatory, but I wanted to double click on that one in particular. We think about how we filter the internet today. We think about there being a category database of URLs that we've processed. And yeah, from Lightspeed side, we think we do a really pretty stand-up job of that. We invest a lot of time and are really proud of how we categorize that. But something that's only been generated in the moment is something that is a challenge that we need to be able to address, and we need to be able to support. Matt, I think that really aligns with the idea of us having those multiple layers. Prerequisite, of course, we do need that category. We do need that support to be able to categorize it, and we need to be able to secure it on the device with like our agent technology as well. But some things further up here we wouldn't have seen on a slide in 2024 or 2025 in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah, let's talk through that. I mean, I think one of the things you said earlier, I do want to just kind of go back to for a moment about, having students with free will, using the internet. That is something that makes it so different from enterprise because unlike enterprise, where somebody can maybe get, written up or even ultimately let go, or otherwise if they're not following content policies, it's a very different process when you're dealing with a bunch of users, millions, across the globe, that are actively trying to get around that filtering solution. They're trying to, in a way, expose themselves to these risks, whether they realize it or not. And then, of course, that's where all of this challenge starts to balloon, and that's where things like, it being faster than ever to create those tools starts to become a cascading problem as we sort of go into 2026. Now, really, we've thought about this a lot. Your points about, categorization, I think, are spot on. It's a very effective system, and we do, I think, on Lightspeed's side, a great job. But it is starting to demand more than that, though you still need that backbone there, right? Fundamentally, when we think about creating a consistent experience for educators, that's why categorization is powerful. When you have things globally categorized, you ensure that everybody gets exactly what's expected, but we need more, right? And so Lightspeed's approach, we use agents, the agent model, and part of the reason we really like this is that it goes with the device, right? Where we're making sure that not only are we getting the maximum visibility, but we're also getting that consistent experience and consistent reporting anywhere the device goes, while still being a bit more invisible when it comes to latency, bandwidth, things like that. And it lets us also do some cool extra things. And again, and I know others out there use agents too. Hopefully, they're doing similar things, which is to say, being able to make them tamper resistant, right? Because you have, like, especially on Windows, you have a lot of extra access that you can provide. So between that and then, of course, obviously the categorization we talked about, another big one is zero-day threat protection. And I'm actually going to mention the fish tank and the integrations here. There's a lot of great resources out there that are provided even for free for various companies to integrate with, to be able to help them keep up and effectively work as part of your cybersecurity suite for actually mitigating, downloads of malware or instances of clicking into phishing, right? I think, whether using Mimecast or some other email filtering tool, there's a lot out there. Um, there is still always that risk that something gets through, somebody clicks something they shouldn't, and having a content filter that's going to block that request is a very important thing. And knowing that the new sites and all these things being created at least same day are getting categorized effectively is also important as well. And then there's that last layer, and you touched on this one. I think you're very correct. It is more recent, and it's because we are seeing that proliferation of new content, whether it's AI driven or otherwise, or sites like Google sites becoming more adopted. We're seeing a greater and greater need to have the ability to read and understand and take action moment to moment, regardless of if something is categorized yet, because it adds that extra safeguard, right? It's another layer that you need, and it can help mitigate significantly any sort of whack-a-mole effect or otherwise that you might be feeling, which I know a lot of people are feeling every day now, trying to keep up.
It's a
Excuse me.
real challenge, Matt. I feel that we've just came back from Bet, the largest sort of show that we have, and it's that whack-a-mole. You've just sort of spring back a few memories of conversations on the trade booth show, the trade floor, where that's exactly what people are living with, and that's time that they want to get back to do other things as well. I'm hopeful that you're going to give us a few little sneak peeks, perhaps here into what we're going to do to try and
Absolutely.
help some of these layers. If you can engineer us, I know that's the case because I'm going to click next on the slide, and that's what you're going to see. I hope so. Sorry for the theater.
You can see the future. It's excellent.
Yeah, imagine.
Yeah. So the first one here, and I think this is probably the most topical, is the real-time proxy detection and blocking. This is something, if you've been paying attention to the market, you'll know we're not the first ones to do it. A lot of these technologies are really, really exciting, but one of the things that we've been seeing, and this happened with image blurring as well, is that the initial effect, when especially if you're using artificial intelligence or things like that to try to let's call it kind of what it is, on the fly content categorization, on the device with some local Chromebook capable model, right? There's a huge false positive problem. Even the best ones out there, we're seeing stats like even the most modern recently released are around like in the 75-ish% accuracy. And that sounds decent, but then you think about, okay, well that means what, 25% of false positives? Like that's a scary thing. And so we did obviously with our image blurring, we released that with the ability to turn it off for specific categories because we know that there's times and places that that's going to be disruptive. And of course, when you combine that with our custom categorization, that gives you a little bit more granular control there as well. But the real-time proxy one is interesting because one of the big challenges that we're seeing is kids doing things like creating legitimate looking education sites, getting them into education, and then turning them into proxies. And then what happens then is that if you've turned off proxy detection on your education categories to prevent false positives, it's kind of starts to defeat the point. And so the direction that we tried to go with this is that rather than doing like AI based on the fly content categorization or text classification. I know there's been some recent conversation in the market about that. Is we're trying to look for the actual signals in the JavaScript and in the page setup, right? You think about when you initialize a proxy in a browser in a web page, there are different headers and different elements and things that have to be set up and configured for that to work just intrinsically. And so we're trying to look for those signs, right? And that way our goal is to be able to not only be very effective at stopping the proxies, but really try to cut down that false positive rate. So that way it's something that you can have on always. So it's a pretty exciting thing. It's something we're working on. I can say it's coming soon. I can't give a full date because we're still tuning it and implementing it as we go. But I will say that we have definitely it is something we're very excited to get out there as soon as we can. And it's been pretty cool to see in action.
I seen a quick demo of it. I think it's really cool. And I think I just want to, as we move to the next one, just underscore one point there as we flow through. So a website that has already been categorized by our significant database as being a potential cybersecurity threat, great, it's gone. It's not going to be visible at all. But the nature of the internet changing so much means that, as you said, legitimate websites might be acting for a while to get through the categorization, then make a change. And suddenly we have this real-time option. To your 75% point, I've heard that time and time again about things loading up differently. If we're already removing that categorization layer for the majority of content, it means it's 75, or with our models, much higher than that, of already a fairly small percentage of browsing, which is going to really increase that accuracy that the student is experiencing. And I think that is critical when we want to give the experience to the teachers to be confident in the material that they're going to share with their class. So
Yep,
I'm really
absolutely.
excited by it. I've seen it in action. It's pretty instant. It's absolutely just it's a flick of the page. It's you're not even loading the content. Once it catches that thing in the header, down it comes. Loving it. Can't wait to see that one coming out, Matt.
Yeah, same.
And you
And
touched
then
on image blurring already.
yeah. So this one is interesting. I said it's kind of it's related but a little less related, and the reason why is that it's not always the result of somebody trying to bypass the filter that they run into this type of content, and in fact, it's in general it's not. But I touched on in that process about how being able to access educational content safely is an important thing, and when we're thinking about the impact of things like false positives or otherwise, and so um we did this with our image blurring like I mentioned with the category control, but one of the things that we wanted to do was also to take that same technology, that same power, and bring it to video as well. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it's and that we're the only ones doing that. I think you really need to make sure though that when you're looking at really any solution that you're understanding how it's going to be comprehensive. And something like video blurring, what we're doing here is it means that in combination with smart play, which is something that Lightspeed offers, which is already categorizing videos, it gives you that extra safety net, right? You know that now if there is an extra video that is being allowed, you want to add, want to open access a little bit more broadly to give your teachers more flexibility. You now also can have confidence knowing that inappropriate content at a frame level is not going to be shown to them, right? So we're actually looking at and scanning the frames of the video as it plays, and then making sure that we are obfuscating or blurring that content out mid video while the video plays. And so it's again, it might seem maybe a little less exciting than the proxy one, but I would say that the argument here for this type of technology really is that when we're thinking about the whack-a-mole, it's not just proxies. It's also adding videos to allow lists. It's also trying to balance, okay, Wikipedia has this type of content on it, but our parents want it, or our teachers, sorry, want it for this. And so, obviously these are pretty obvious examples, but I think it really illustrates how this type of technology can keep you out of the weeds and let you relax a little bit. So that way, everyone has a better experience and you're not sitting there entering things into lists all day long.
And you say it might sound obvious around the Wikipedia one, but still, that is a discussion that's going on in administrators' offices across the
It's true.
globe, still where they have this angst of such an educational resource and making it available, or not, because there is a risky 1% of user-generated content that could change, or just general, like the image example in our slide deck here of the human reproductive system has a perfect basis for certain students at certain times, but not necessarily
Yeah.
for all of our students. And getting that level of granularity is requires the specificity to be able to look beyond what a URL will be across the website that it's on and starting to look at this. I'm going to come
Yeah.
back because this is the first time I'm hearing that it's frame by frame, Matt. That sounds awesome. So,
Yeah.
really it is going to be that instantaneous and all of that's not that it's streaming away. That's going to be a local and very fast decision that's being made.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's built on the same technology again that the image blurring is when it comes to the AI model that's scanning. And so we're essentially able to just grab each frame on the fly and run it through. Fortunately, for those of you who are familiar with how some of these image scanning systems how they work, they don't actually require that high of a resolution. And so it allows us to sort of keep the performance implications to a minimum, right? You're not really having to deal with issues there because what we're actually streaming to it is like the lowest resolution version of the video, right? So it's not trying to make a decision on a multi-megabyte high definition video frame. It's a much more efficient technology than that.
And I'm going to hark back to one of our geeky discussions because we talked about this in terms of how we test our solutions. You know, it's not as if we know that students are all sitting there with high-powered Windows machines and MacBook Pros in their classes. We test these on some of the most entry-level Chromebook devices on purpose, don't we, to make sure that this is going to work and function at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even my Chromebooks, it's a 2019 that I use it on. So, it's not the newest model, that's for sure. But even on something like that, it feels invisible, which is obviously that's what we're aiming for. And and I will say to that point, it is also built in a way with queuing and things like that that is specifically designed to make sure that it cannot try to process too much at once and slow you down, right? It will always prioritize like content that's above the fold, and then of course will work its way down from there. If you've used the image blurring, then you understand how that's working, etc. So yeah, but it's a very similarly designed.
I love it. Thank you. And
Absolutely.
everyone can see why I love geeking out with Matt. It's so good. He has in-depth knowledge of how all of these things work. And I know when you're thinking about how you're protecting your students in your environment, you want to have as much detail and as much confidence as possible. And I've yet to meet anyone with as much confidence building technique as Matt has here with his deep knowledge of all of the functions that we've got. But Matt, that's enough praise for you for now. I want to
Thank you.
talk a little bit about how we're sort of reporting this.
Well, actually, really quickly, I will say one last thing there, too. The Wikipedia one's a good example, but the other one that's actually really interesting that a lot of people forget about even is just Google Safe Search. I think it's really easy to think that because Safe Search is turned on, that means you're not going to come across inappropriate content. But that's not at all the case, right? When you think about, examples, whether it's kids searching for, bikinis or who knows what it might be, there's all sorts of things that don't pass the cut from what Safe Search is trying to do, which is explicit content. And so that's again another place where this type of technology can just make day to day, even if it's not changing your allow or block strategies, it can just make your day to day safer. But please, 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 I say this with the most love and appreciation for the feature of that's possible. Um, understand that there will be categories and places that you will want to turn blurring off, right? There is a reality, right? Again, regardless of the extra tuning and the things that we've done to try to improve that process, right? Understand that it's going to take a little bit of tuning. You can change your thresholds, whether or not you want it to be at a strict level versus more normal or relaxed for how it's doing its detection. But kind of just go into it, knowing you'll need to get some of those dials figured out right, so you're not creating any disruption. So. But
Thanks.
with that said, moving on to security insights. So obviously, we've been talking a lot about various, whether it's bypass attempts or issues with potential malware downloads or otherwise. One of the things that we have all this rich information. If you've ever clicked around in Lightspeed's web activity log, and I know other providers have their own kind of versions of things. Raw information is great. You can do whatever you want to do with it. That's fantastic. But a lot of you don't have time to sit there and agonize over those details and put that kind of stuff together. And so we started to put together this security insights dashboard, and we had a couple of things that we wanted to do. The first one was at a high level, surface what actually is going on. Even if we're blocking stuff, that's great. But even knowing that the computer, the device, the student, whoever was making those requests is important, right? If you're seeing spikes in requests to phishing sites or malware sites, that's an indicator that an email got through that shouldn't have, right? Potentially a phishing links. That's an indicator that maybe a device got compromised, and so it's phoning home a bunch and it's causing these types of issues. And so, and of course, on the allows side, maybe that's intentional. Maybe you have some staff policies or even like just privilege policies that allow people to go to whatever they want. You still should know what's happening, right? And so that's what this insight dashboard provides, is that high level view. But then we need to create connection so that way you can take action, right? Because I think that's what a lot of dashboards miss. Even, I'll say even some of our own that we've created in the past have had that same challenge. And so, what you'll notice with ours is when you click into them, you then get that detail view. You then see the users. And that's a really important thing for making sure that we can bridge the gap between seeing the problem and then being able to address the problem. And so, you'll see a couple different views here. I know the screenshots are small, but you'll see the trend charts over time where you can look at it by sort of security category, and then you'll even see an activity breakdown where you actually can see the top threats as far as like visits to different host names to see if there's similarities, but also who the top users or devices are. So that way you know who you might need to track down or check in on or otherwise, in case something did get compromised. So again, it's simple, but it's meant to just be really easy, digestible, usable, and then actionable at the end of the day.
Simple by design in that side, Matt, as you say, because I always say, and I love how clickable Lightspeed is, that we deliver a higher level statistic, but it's that drilling down that comes there. Once you've figured out that there's something you need to go and investigate, a click, you can tend to be able to dig deeper into that other levels, which is where you start to really get into the meat of what you're there to search for. But it's great
Yep.
to see some new visuals coming out for these things. We're always wanting to look at the information that we gather about what students are browsing with in different ways. And I think
Yeah.
this does a great job of visualizing that, and giving you greater granularity into the cybersecurity side.